In this episode, we are going to break down the top 4 things our clients struggled with this month. But first, the 3-episode rule. If you are new to this podcast, 3 episodes, that's the limit we put on this before you got to pay the dues. And all the do is just to leave a quick review. 5 stars, quick blurb if you want to. Tag us on social. If you're listening beyond those 3 episodes, you're probably getting value. It's probably helping you in some way. So help us spread the word, reach more people. That's all we ask. Returning listeners, you already knew that.
Also, I have a link in the description of this episode. All episodes moving forward, that will be an anonymous Q&A box. So at any time, you guys can drop questions to us. They're anonymous. We don't see who they're from. But if you have ideas for episodes or something you want us to touch on in the podcast, drop them there. Also, Spotify listeners, I just found out you can also comment each individual episode, which is really cool. So if you click on each, like the actual episode, there'll be a space for you to drop a comment or write something to us. So if you feel like sharing anything about that episode, go for it. I just found out that was a thing this week. So we can also use that as a Q&A spot too.
Now you know.
Now you know. But I wanted to share, and this is going to be a recurring podcast theme each month of just common client struggles. So something that I have our coaches do is check in with me once a week and just share like updates about how our clients are doing, sharing wins obviously, but also sharing common struggles so that we can then talk about them. There are things we often talk about on this podcast and in our content, but I wanted to just declare more of a actual monthly episode to this because I think it'll be helpful for you guys to hear how we sort of run things and just how we help our clients. So
also, we are now on YouTube. Officially, we got the new camera that's going to stop shutting off. This episode is a social experiment where we both wear bright red. We're going to see if that impacts views. You didn't realize that?
No, I didn't. I just wore red because it's my color of the year.
I just matched my red.
So, yeah, welcome.
Here to Evolve podcast on YouTube.
If you're on YouTube, make sure you drop a comment and say hello there too. Number 1, jumping right in, top client struggle of this month. This client is trying to juggle it all as a working mom who is also in college. She said she just wants a moment to not do something sometimes. I can relate so hard to that.
You don't say.
I think this is common. We work with a lot of parents. We work with a lot of busy people in general. And I can totally relate to that feeling of overwhelm and relate to that feeling of just not wanting to check in with your coach or focus on your nutrition or do your training. Like you get to a point where just every aspect of your life feels overwhelming. And I think, this is something where you have to ask yourself, are the things that you are currently doing that you do have control over? So outside of work, obviously, outside of your kids, outside of college in this case, there's probably things that you're choosing to fill your time with if you're struggling to be consistent with your training and nutrition. Are those adding value to you in the long term? I think sometimes we get roped back into old habits and just things that may feel good in the moment. And sometimes, I've struggled with this exact mindset too, especially being early postpartum. You get overwhelmed and you just want to just sit in a quiet room and not do anything. But I'll say most cases, sometimes that does fill the cup, but most of the time my cup gets more full when I do choose to go move my body, go for a walk, go if I want to do a workout, make some meals for the week. Like I reap those benefits so much more and I feel so much better for so much longer when I choose something that fills my cup in that way.
You feel like when you're playing catch up all the time, that's what really tends to get you burnt out is I'm rushing to do this, I'm rushing to do that, I'm unprepared, I feel like I'm failing. When you're accomplishing little things, like that rewarding sense, that little drip of dopamine where you're actually earning it, makes a big difference. And there are certain times when you absolutely do need to just chill out and do nothing. But to that extent, can you reflect on your day and figure out, okay, what am I just wasting minutes with? And I'm very guilty of this. If I sit down because I literally have 7 minutes, I could probably bang out one task, or I can scroll on Instagram or read about what the Patriots or Celtics did this week or this today. And you put those, 5, 6, 7 chunks of 7, 8, 9, 10 minutes together, and you've got a full hour. So if you can kind of build out, okay, if I do this, I do this, I do this, and then by the end of the day, I do have that extra half an hour because I'm not grinding to finish up on all the things I didn't do. And it seems like, oh, when do you stop? When do you stop? But if you actually look at your phone and figure out how much time you spend scrolling, and I did this for one of our daily emails, I threw this stat in there. I think it was 28 hours a week.
It's honestly,
the average.
I mean, granted, we use our phones a lot for work, so it's hard to like.
Well, the American average was 4 hours a day, which is 28 hours a week.
Average. Okay.
So you get an entire extra day per week.
Yeah.
By not scribbling. And like, for those of you who don't work on your phone, like if you go to a job all day, whatever, granted, a lot of the time you'll be doing that at the job, I assume. Don't tell your boss. But anyway, even if you just allocated that time, like there is a huge amount of time each day that you're just on your phone mindlessly.
Yeah.
So you have an extra day to play with if you're in that average.
So, with this client, their coach ultimately, had a few conversations with them trying to figure out where this disconnect was coming from, where was this stemming from, and they came to the conclusion that her expectations were off, but she wasn't quite sure where they were off and how, why it was happening. So they first started by just paying attention to that, becoming aware of where her expectations were surrounding training and nutrition. So that's step one, is that awareness, something we talk about all the time on the podcast. And her homework from her coach was to take inventory of what she is wanting / expecting to do and what makes her feel defeated. And then she also added in specific questions to this client's check-in so that she's reflecting on this when she does check in with her every week to make sure that they are moving in the right direction. So that accountability layer is like clutch. But so important to just simply reflect on what is and isn't working when things aren't really going your way right now.
And it's also like there are 1,000 things we always have to do, but can you come up with 3, 4, or 5 that you need to do today that are absolutely non-negotiable, and then do those 5 things and then not worry about, tackling the other 30?
Yeah. All right. So that was the first one. Number 2, this is a different client. Lots of weekend events month after month and feeling worried about it slowing or completely stalling her fat loss progress. So this client was in a cut. She, like most of us, has a lot of things going on every weekend, family events, work events, different things happening where it was making it harder for her to stick to her macros. And the first thing that one of our coaches reminded her was that this is her life, and sometimes this is just what it is. Sometimes it's okay to take the slower route to your fat loss goals. I think a lot of us are so ingrained that we have to move as fast as possible towards our goals, when in reality, taking the slower route is perfectly fine. Like if you're on this journey for life, you don't need to rush it. It can be something that you kind of take your time with. And I would argue most of you will probably be more successful in the long term if you do take your time, if you do take that slower approach, because number one, then you don't have to miss out on any of these events and feel like you're picking and choosing. But number two, it still allows you to learn through the process and figure out how to navigate these events without completely throwing it out the window too. So I think embracing that slower approach is important. And what this coach did was she gave her options for dialing it in on the weekend. And I don't know exactly what her options were, but I'll share like what I would suggest for this client or for somebody who was struggling with this. I would often give my clients, like I would have them label their events as red, yellow, or green. So like think of a stoplight. Red events were like full stop. You are hitting your macros still. You are not being super flexible with it. You still want to go to the event, but maybe you bring your own food, or maybe you eat beforehand, or maybe you eat afterwards. So you are still partaking, but you're still 100% committed to what your goals are for that day. Yellow is more of that middle ground. Maybe you go and you are going out to dinner or something and you look up the menu beforehand, pick something that's going to fit your macros. You don't necessarily track your macros for that meal, but you kind of keep that in mind and you're still mindful about what your goals are. And then a green event is more so just like, I'm going to go and enjoy this fully, not think about my nutrition for this one event, and then get back to it the next day, which all of those are perfectly fine. You just don't want to have all red or all green. Like you want to pick and choose which events you want to quote unquote splurge on and which events you want to dial things in a little bit more. So that was super helpful for a lot of my clients that were struggling here.
And listen, there are different layers to all this. I talk about this on our prospect calls. We want you to go on vacation. We want you to have fun weekends away where you're not tracking. And if you're not, we'll plan a practice session of those anyway. We'll have a certain amount of days you're not tracking. Here are the things we're going to focus on. It could be as a general outline. It could be focusing on a protein portion and a plant in each meal. Glass of water first thing in the morning. A walk at lunchtime. Stopping eating 3 hours before bed, enjoying in moderation. Like it could be something as simple as that, where you can still see slower progress because we're not fully dialed in, but we can still progress without worrying about numbers. Or at the very minimum, we're maintaining where we're at and we're going to feel really good. So on top of not backsliding, we can enjoy the event even more. We can enjoy vacation even more because we're not tired. We're not sluggish. We're not run down. We don't feel super heavy. We can go do all the fun things, but we're not worried about weighing everything that we're eating. We're not worried about, visualizing a specific portion size to track. We're just focusing on these core habits, doing those throughout the day. We feel good. Keep rolling.
Love it. Number 3, this client was struggling with wanting to work out due to stress. So she was previously in a fat loss phase. She had 2 deaths in her family of, pretty close family members. Her routine felt all over the place, obviously. So they decided to pause the cut and kind of assess what was happening. And I think, this is a prime example of why it's important to have seasons of training, seasons of life. When you go through something like grief and your stress is so high day to day and there's not much you can do to control it per se, or it feels like you're just in those early stages of grief, it can feel really hard to just do your normal things like that's expected. So being aware of, this isn't working right now. I'm not in the right mindset to cut. We're going to pause the cut. That is a win, I think. And also, her coach just had her set basic movement goals for the week versus, just like they were focusing only on setting movement goals as far as her moving her body versus like an actual program, which may for a lot of people feel like you're going backwards, but at the end of the day, if that's helping you stay active, it's still a win. So you have to count your wins in that sense. So her goal, for example, was to just move 3 times intentionally and in any way to just bring her back to the habit of getting that activity in. And then once she got consistent with that, they got back to more of a structured program. So it took about 2 weeks for her to just have those movement goals set and get back into that flow of, okay, I'm going to wake up and move my body 3 times this week intentionally. And then she was able to get back to her list, which is awesome. So just a prime example of like, you don't have to just throw everything away for a few weeks and then feel like you don't know how to pick it back up. Like if we can find that middle ground, again, that gray area, and embrace some type of movement, even if it's not ideal. Like I think she was following like YouTube videos, which we know is not like, that's not something you should be doing forever if you have specific goals. Like you don't want to follow random workouts, but for her at this time, like that was what's going to work. That's going to get her up and get her moving. Great. We'll do that. So example of like just meeting our clients where they are, I guess, is a good one there. And it's so important because everybody's at different starting points. Everybody goes through different things in their life, and you can't expect to just follow the same type of program forever without bumps in the road.
And listen, it's a huge part of this process to learn how to not backslide. So it's not always about progress. Like we just talked about with the intuitive phases, like going on vacation. If you can learn when life gets crazy busy, when you're dealt with a sledgehammer and something just knocks you off, how can we maintain? How can we work through that? And learning that is one of the most critical parts. It's not always about being dialed in on point to achieve a goal. It's about how do I balance this? How do I get back up and just maintain where I'm at? So if we can prevent that backslide, we take the roller coaster of progress, free fall, progress, free fall, this cycle most people are on, and we create this longer term view of longer projection of progression. So progress, maintain. Progress, maintain. When you lose that backslide, you're picking up where you left off, and it just becomes that much more exponential as far as progress over time.
And the last one we'll touch on today is struggling to hit your nutrition goals or your macros when you don't have any food prepped. I think this one is super common and often not talked about enough. We know that prepping and planning is key, right? So if someone is consistently struggling with meeting their macros, because they don't have the right foods prepped. Oftentimes that's going to be what? Protein and veggies, I would say. Carbs and fats are kind of easy to get in if you're like on the go, but
Much more convenient to grab
protein
those.
is much harder. Hitting your fiber goals is much harder. So how can we make prepping and planning a little bit easier? How can we navigate that first? So this would happen with a lot of clients. Like they would prep their meals on Sunday, like most people kind of prep their lunches and maybe even dinners for the week. And then a lot of our clients would get to like Thursday, Friday, and then through the weekend and kind of like fall off a little bit, and their macros wouldn't be as consistent. And we would dive deeper into that. And it really wasn't a matter of like them not being able, it was because they weren't prepped. Like they ran out of their prepped food for the week, and then they were like scrambling through the weekend and then just like choosing the easier option. So an example of a quick fix in that scenario would be to do 2 smaller preps throughout the week. So maybe you prep on Sunday, and that will get you through Wednesday or Thursday, and then you do another one on Thursday or Friday to get you through the weekend. You have to treat your weekends like you treat your weekdays as far as your food intake goes. Even if you have events and maybe you go out to dinner, like what can you control the whole rest of the day? What can you control the other times that you're eating? Instead of just letting it be a free-for-all, how can we plan and prep things and make your life easier so that you can just pick the easy option that's in your fridge that's already prepped? So that's important, but also flip side of this is learning how to navigate those unplanned days, because we're all going to have days where maybe something happens, like your kids get sick, or I don't know, whatever, something, life happens and it doesn't go as planned. How do you navigate that when you don't have anything planned to eat? Can you use what you've learned to come up with something? Like you are really good at coming up with like quick meals. Like when you're in between calls and have a super busy day and we don't have things prepped, you can pull like a protein shake, RX bar.
That's because
combo out of your butt.
do like, if I need something, like I'll eat it. I'll figure it out. So I'll find the magic combination. And that was the other part of what you were just talking about. I was going to jump in with. It's not always necessarily that you prepped all the perfect things. It's making sure you have the quick things easily accessible. So if you're at work, having stuff stocked in the fridge or in your car or brought in a lunchbox or whatever. If you're home, having those things stocked up. So for us, protein shakes, Greek yogurt, beef bars, the chomp bars, whatever those are. So I'll throw some stuff together. Nuts. So I'm big on pistachios. So my quick and easy go-to is, a protein shake, RX bar. I can do the yogurt if I need to. I'll usually do a handful of nuts.
Mine and Kai's lately is cottage cheese with pretzels. Like
Easy
cottage
peasy.
cheese has 19 grams of protein per half cup, which is amazing. And if you eat some pretzels with it, there's some carbs, there's a little bit of fat in the cottage cheese. Like I think a lot of people get caught up or hung up on the idea that it has to be like this prepped chicken or prepped veggies that you have to have readily available at all times. But no, like nobody does that. Even like we're home all day and we don't do that. So have quicker options that are ready to go in each macro category and figure out what that looks like for you. But that's going to be the key, because that's going to keep you on track and be that easy option when you need it most, rather than just eating, I don't know, ordering out or eating fast food or just eating a snack that has 0 grams of protein in it. So finding those quick snack ideas is super helpful. But at the end of the day, figuring out how to implement prepping and planning into your life, and that's going to look different for everybody. That was just one example of prepping on Sundays and Thursdays. Like our clients all do it vastly different. So it has to make sense for your life, but you can do it.
You can do it.
So we're going to wrap it up there. Just a quick little episode today. Hopefully it was super helpful to hear what our clients are struggling with and how we help them overcome it. Like I said, if you want to drop what you're struggling with in the question box in the show notes, it is there for you guys. And where can they find you?
At Josh Skutnik.
And I'm at Alessandra Skutnik.